Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
And now, the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton, sponsored by GEHA.
Welcome to this holiday edition of the Federal Drive on Federal News Network. It's Thursday, December 25th. I'm your host, Terry Gerton, and I'm glad you're here. Thanks for making the Federal Drive part of your Christmas holiday. Today, we wanted to share a gift with you, some of our favorite conversations with amazing people about what motivates their public service. We'll talk with new Napa Fellow Jamie Morin, who helped shape defense strategy from inside the Pentagon. Now he's being honored for his contributions to public service. And Fleming Award winner Lieutenant Commander Melissa DeVera, whose work brings clean water and new opportunities to tribal communities across the country. Those stories and much more ahead during this special Christmas Day edition, the best of the Federal Drive. But first, Katie Kale has been elected a Fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration, recognizing her long career in federal service and her commitment to operational excellence. She reflected on what drew her into public administration, what's kept her going, and how she hopes to shape the field's future. Katie, it's great to have you here this morning.
Thank you for having me, Terry. It's wonderful to see you.
Well, I want to start by congratulating you on your election as a Napa Fellow, a group that's near and dear to my heart.
Yes, I know it is very near and dear to your heart. I am thrilled to be part of this organization, one that I have really looked up to for many years.
Well, it's always interesting to look back at the history of folks who get elected. You've spent years in key operational roles across government, Capitol Hill to GSA. Tell us what first drew you into public administration and why you stuck with it for so long.
Thank you for asking that question. I really have always believed that public service is more than a job. It's truly a calling, which is something that we heard a lot at the Napa conference last week. For me, it's also part of my family legacy. So I am a third generation public servant. My mother, my uncle, my grandfather, all public servants before me. And I actually got my first government job in the federal government as a page in the U.S. House of Representatives when I was in high school.
Wow.
And from there, I just knew that this is what I wanted to do. So I grew up in Massachusetts, but came down to Virginia, went to George Mason University, majored in government and politics, worked for a civic education group before I then went back to the Hill. And as you said, I worked for 4 different senators. I was a senior leader at the White House. And then most recently, I was the deputy administrator at a wonderful agency, which is the U.S. General Services Administration. I also was, during that time, during the last administration, I was chair of the U.S. Access Board as well, which is a very small, sometimes unknown agency that makes sure that all people, and especially people with disabilities, have access to their federal buildings, to their federal websites. And I had the honor of expanding my own experiences by taking on that job as well.
Katie, as you look back at all of those years of service, all of those diverse organizations that you worked in, is there a moment or a project or an initiative that really stands out as especially meaningful to you? Something that makes you think, that is why I do this work?
So, Terry, I think that you know this more than most. Like, the thing about being a public administrator is that so much of what we do is behind the scenes. And most people out in the public often only notice something when it goes wrong or goes sideways. But every day, public servants are creating this, really efficient and effective government that works and makes life easier for people. And so we really plan for our good days, but we also are always watching out and figuring out what we have to do on bad days and making sure that we can create contingency plans and make sure that the public really doesn't know what could have happened. And because of that, I think that a lot of public administrators and public servants in general measure their careers and maybe these like small wins that add up as opposed to one, big visible accomplishment. Now, that said, I am very proud of the work that I've done, especially the teams that I've been part of and what we've been able to achieve together. And I'll give you two quick ones. One is back in like 2008, 2009, I was the director of operations for the Obama-Biden presidential transition team. And during that time, I worked closely with not only GSA, but also the outgoing team from President Bush's administration. And I think that what I've been seeing a lot lately, and especially anytime transitions come up, is that this group of people were really able to execute one of maybe the most successful transition of presidential powers. And I'm very, very proud of that. At the same time, figuring out what it was going to look like on Inauguration Day and really just kind of overseeing that daily operations, facilities, technology, human resources, security, all those little things, again, that are behind the scenes, but really add up over time. The second one is much more recent. It is back in 2021 when I returned to GSA. And at that point, I was both the deputy administrator, but I was also the acting administrator. And it was at the height of the pandemic, and the agency and the people were really facing this kind of uncertainty and low engagement, low morale. And really, we realized that we needed to reimagine how and where government work happened. I was tapped to co-chair a cross-government task force. It's a mouthful. It's the Safer Federal Workforce Task Force. But there we developed policies and procedures that we made sure were consistent in messaging, not only throughout the government, but within an agency itself. And knowing that there were so many more unknowns than knowns, we wanted to make sure that we were able to iterate as the situation was changing. And then within GSA, I wanted to make sure that we were leading by example, and we really took a look at every position and determined whether it was an on-site position or if it was eligible for remote work. We made sure that we were polling our workforce to see what additional equipment that they needed to do, the people's work either at home or at the office. We asked for feedback often and made sure that we were responding to that feedback, so that feedback loop. And because of that, I'm very proud to say that GSA was one of the top 5 places to work in government during those years, which were really tough years for a lot of people.
What would you say if you were speaking to someone just starting out now? What advice would you give them about building a career in public service?
I love this question because I received it so many times. At first, I thought maybe it's different than it was a year ago when I left the administration. But I think it's the same. And the first one is to say thank you, right? Thank you for choosing public service. And there is a lot of very important work that needs to be done at all levels of government, federal, state, local, and not only today, but well into the future. And we really need people who have talent, and we need their passion, and we need creativity, which often is overlooked. And I think to an individual, I would recommend that they do what they enjoy. There is a place for just about any career within public service. Often people only think about the policymakers or the elected officials when they're thinking about government and public service, but it really includes so many career choices and career paths. Just thinking about folks that I've worked for, statisticians to building managers to police and security officers to astronauts. There are so many jobs from the private sector that translate into the public sector and connect you to a mission-driven organization.
I've been speaking with Katie Kale. She's a former Deputy Administrator of GSA and a newly elected Fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration. Katie, thanks so much for joining me and sharing your story with us, and congratulations on your election.
Thank you, Terry. It was great to be here today.
You can find this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up next, Fleming Award winner Lieutenant Commander Melissa DeVera's work brings clean water and new opportunities to tribal communities across the country. You're listening to the best of the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. Welcome back to this special holiday edition of the best of the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. Lieutenant Commander Melissa DeVera's leadership helped deliver billions in sanitation projects to tribal nations, improving access to clean water and public health infrastructure. Her work building partnerships and expanding opportunity earned her a prestigious Fleming Award and the gratitude of the community she served. Lieutenant Commander DeVera, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Terry. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Well, you have a great story, and I want to just offer some questions that I'll prompt you to tell it. You have spent your career at the intersection of engineering and public health. What inspired you to join public service and focus on public health that way?
Well, I would say it was something that I kind of fell into. I am a tribal member. I'm an enrolled member of the Rocky Boy Chippewa Cree tribe, but I didn't grow up on my tribe. And so when I had decided to go to college and I was looking at the different degrees and I fell into engineering, I found that I was really drawn to working with Indian Health Service because, even though I didn't grow up with my tribe and on my reservation, I really wanted to feel a sense of connectedness and be able to give back with my, by utilizing my education. So that's what kind of started it.
Well, tell us about the kind of work you're doing now. You're at this intersection of Indian Health Services and engineering, especially in the Division of Sanitation Facilities Construction.
Yeah, so my role my initial role was, as an environmental engineer. So what that means, if you're not familiar, is, we basically work with drinking water, wastewater, and solid waste systems. So I started my career out in the field, as a junior engineer, and I'm currently working out of our headquarters office, still with the same division. But right now, not only do I get to kind of do some of that work, I also get to focus on recruiting, which has quickly developed into a favorite duty of mine.
So what are you recruiting for? My guess is that it has to do with the bipartisan infrastructure law, which promised a significant amount of funding to improve environmental facilities on tribal lands.
With the bipartisan infrastructure law, our division was allocated $3.5 billion to provide sanitation facilities or sanitation infrastructure to tribes. So we faced a significant shortage of engineers to deliver billions of dollars in sanitation projects for our tribal nations. So my job was really, when coming into this position, was to build partnerships. So I built partnerships with the Department of Energy to utilize their STEM workforce development asset, ORISE, also the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, and the U.S. Public Health Service Commission Corps. So by taking these partnerships and leveraging them together, we were able to bring in our first ever ORISE interns to the Indian Health Service, and we tripled our engineering and also our environmental health intern pipeline. So that's kind of what I've been working on in the last year.
That's exciting. And how is bringing all of that additional human capacity to the organization helped you move forward on the actual construction projects?
Well, our division had been facing chronic staff shortages across the agency. We were looking at vacancy rates that were exceeding 30%. In our more rural areas, that those vacancy rates were hire. So historically, our division has always relied on internship programs to bring in engineers. We relied primarily on the USPHS internships to bring in, kind of junior officers as interns and introduce them to, engineering, and also, engineering with that public health mindset, which is, it's a very unique or niche combination. That pipeline had a little bit collapsed on us. So rebuilding that pipeline of interns is going to start feeding more entry-level engineers into our positions so that these construction projects can actually move forward and get completed.
I'm speaking with Lieutenant Commander Melissa De Vera. She is the Assistant Director of Management Operations for the Indian Health Services Division of Sanitation Facilities and Construction. Melissa, I love that you're building the talent pipeline. I also want to understand a little bit about the building of these projects. What impact do they have on the local communities on tribal lands when you can deliver clean water and sanitation services?
When we can deliver safe drinking water, I think for me, I'm definitely a drinking water person. I think that safe drinking water, I think that aesthetically pleasing drinking water is also important. I think that when we're able to deliver those services, especially to, homes that actually, never had those types of services, I think that it brings a sense of relief and dignity for families. I strongly believe that when people don't have to think about where am I going to get water? When am I going to get water? Or, is my water going to be clean enough? I think when you take that away, that gives people the chance to focus on other things, like improving themselves, which could include, maybe, education, working, spending more time with your family. So I think when we kind of remove some of those barriers, barriers to access to, safe drinking water, clean drinking water, that, we're really freeing up people's time.
I love that.
Which is precious.
Absolutely. And I want to ask, you're at this very interesting intersection of technology and impact, and as a tribal member yourself, what kind of leadership lessons have you learned from managing these kinds of projects, being in this situation, bringing in and recruiting folks, even cross-boundary, building those cross-boundary partnerships that you mentioned earlier? What's sticking with you?
What's sticking with me about this particular experience with recruiting is that, leadership is about partnerships. And then when I look back on my career in the field, that applies as well. So we have partnerships with our students, or with our intern students. We have partnerships, they create a partnership kind of with their mentors. We have partnerships with the agencies that we're collaborating with to try to bring in interns. And we definitely have partnerships with the tribal nations, with our tribal partners. And I think that what I've kind of learned is that, leadership is really about humility and trust also. So I think that for this particular initiative, the difference really came from us, one, having really great agency partners, and two, having really good mentors within the Indian Health Service. And we also had some mentors that were actually outside of the Indian Health Service and the National Park Service. But having those mentors work with our students one-on-one, that actually made me learn that my role is really just to kind of connect people, clear barriers, and then kind of step back so that all of those relationships can kind of flourish and go in the direction that they need to go. So I think I didn't feel like I was truly really leading anything until maybe the second summer when interns were returning for another internship. So I feel like that was like a quiet win, but it also just kind of showed me that, we found some students that were interested in engineering, interested in public health, and that our work resonated with them as much as it does with us. And so hopefully we get to see them return as, entry-level engineers and, start their career in their own journeys.
Well, you've just received the Arthur S. Fleming Award recognizing your cross-boundary leadership. Congratulations for that. What's next for you and your work?
So for me, I think what's next is I really want to sustain these partnerships beyond the bipartisan infrastructure law funding. I want this to grow beyond that. And maybe see this as building not just infrastructure, but also, this work contributing to a long-term workforce. And I want, a workforce that, we've had chronic vacancies for many years. And I know that our current staff have just felt that for so long. So I think that really is my priority, is really like kind of establishing this as permanent infrastructure, I guess, as an engineer. That's what I would say.
I've been speaking with Lieutenant Commander Melissa De Vera, Assistant Director of Management Operations for the Indian Health Services Division of Sanitation and Facilities and Construction. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us, and congratulations again on your award.
Great. Thank you, Terry.
You can find this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts. And still to come, Larissa Couts and Melwood are proving that inclusive employment can thrive. But first, new Napa fellow Jamie Morin helped shape defense strategy from inside the Pentagon, and now he's being honored for his contributions to public service. This is the best of the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. Welcome back to this special holiday edition of the best of the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. Jamie Morin has been elected a Fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration, recognizing his leadership in defense budgeting, cost analysis, and strategic planning. He reflected on what drew him into public service, what's changed in public administration, and how he hopes to contribute to the Academy's mission. Jamie, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
Congratulations on being a newly elected Fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration. What does that honor mean to you?
Well, gosh, the number of folks that I have admired over the years who are fellows of the Academy is pretty impressive. And so it was humbling, but really a wonderful recognition. I was deeply honored.
Well, it reflects a lifetime of service. Tell us about what motivated you to begin public service in the first place.
I take it back to family influence for one. I was raised with a really strong tradition of making the community stronger. My mother's a school teacher, has worked with autistic children for most of her career, still working in that field. And both my parents just had a really strong commitment to the community. So it starts with that, right? And then for me, I grew up in the late Cold War, and that built in me a really strong interest in national security. And so I was struck that a meaningful way to serve and to strengthen the nation was to work in a career in national security. And it's been just enormously rewarding and fulfilling.
As you think back across that career, you served in the Air Force, you served at DOD level. What stands out as one of your most meaningful accomplishments in the public administration space?
Well, you said accomplishments, but let me start with a moment. I guess this will sound hopelessly naive in these cynical days, but the first chance I had to take the oath to uphold the Constitution, when as a graduate student, I guess I was 22 or 23 years old, I was offered the chance to work in the Pentagon on requirements and plans, and to be pulled into something, much, much bigger than yourself, to be pulled into incredibly consequential matters and to do it with a devotion to those principles in the Constitution. That, just being in that moment as a young person was a tremendously shaping experience for me. So that's where I would have to start. And, I've probably taken that oath personally 6 or 7 times since. I've administered it dozens of times. I had the privilege of presiding at a graduation ceremony from basic military training with, hundreds of young people starting a career in military service. But you keep coming back to, we are offered an opportunity in this nation to uphold a constitution that's bigger than any of us, bigger than the politics of the moment. And that's a great starting point. To the accomplishments, I've worked mostly in resource management, in making smart decisions with the taxpayers' money, chief financial officer for the Air Force, cost assessment and program evaluation for the Department of Defense as a whole. So the biggest opportunities for impact in roles like that are when you can get something started on the right foot. And the things we do in national security, particularly in developing technology, it takes time. We're trying to do really hard things, but I had the opportunity with both the Air Force and working for the Secretary of Defense to get a few really consequential and major programs started. Thinking about the B-21 bomber for the Air Force, for example. It had been a long time since the U.S. Air Force had been able to buy a bomber on something approaching planned cost and planned schedule. And it looks like we're on a path to be pretty darn close to that on that program. And so that's a tremendous thing to be able to look back and say, hey, we've been working on this. It's a big deal. Billions of taxpayer dollars, critical to the success of the Joint Force. And, I was able to have my fingers all over that at the outset. So that's a significant one. Moments of crisis. We've recently gone through a government shutdown. I had the challenge of operating through a few of those as Air Force CFO and working in OST, and some close calls as well as actual shutdowns. Those are searing moments where leaders have to make tough decisions. Again, with the Constitution first and foremost in our mind, our system isn't always perfect, but it is ours, and it's our responsibility to operate within it and to make it better. And then finally, I guess I would highlight people in that the public service is an important calling. It demands things of people that are different than what we ask of people in the private sector. And because it's sometimes hard for people to get their feet under them in the complexity of an organization like the Department of Defense or many of the other federal agencies, we have to make long-term investments in our people. So being able to be involved in hiring and developing talent and giving people an opportunity to really accomplish their potential, and then to also send them forth to go do bigger and better things, whether in government or outside. Those have been just tremendously rewarding for me.
I'm speaking with Jamie Morin. He's Vice President of Defense Strategic Space at the Aerospace Corporation and a newly elected Fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration. Jamie, you told some great stories there, but early in that last response, you mentioned the oath of office and allegiance to the Constitution. You've seen in your service firsthand how trust in government can be tested in times of fiscal uncertainty and strategic transition, and we're certainly in that right now. How do you view the current state of public administration, and what can it do to help increase public trust in government?
Yeah, I think approaching public administration as an exercise in continuous improvement is really important. We have to always be willing to question the how of how we get things done. Take advantage of new technology, take advantage of new concepts and approaches. We have to do that still with an eye to the core principles, right? Public service is a public trust. We have to conduct ourselves in public administration in such a way that there is no question about the integrity with which people work and that they are doing things with the right ends in mind. We're talking about a nation approaching its 250th birthday, so the timelines and the time horizon that the public administration has to think about is different than what we as individual humans have to think about, or what even long-lived companies have to think about. We have to take that long-term perspective for the betterment of the nation. But again, you've got to balance that with responsiveness to changing needs. the needs that the public administration meets in a time are shaped by the time. They're shaped by the technology. They're shaped by the psychology of the citizens. They're shaped by the external environment that we operate in. So continuous improvement, willingness to adapt, but founded on those core principles of what government is about and the Constitution we uphold. I think that's the bottom line for me.
I've been speaking with Jamie Morin. He's Vice President of Defense Strategic Space at the Aerospace Corporation. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and congratulations on your election as a Napa Fellow.
My pleasure. Thank you, Terry.
You can find this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts. Up next, Larissa Couts and Melwood are proving that inclusive employment can thrive. You're listening to the best of the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. Welcome back to this special holiday edition, the best of the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. Melwood has been a pioneer in disability employment for nearly 60 years. Today, the organization supports workers at more than 60 federal sites, delivers tailored vocational services, and partners with researchers and agencies to expand opportunities for neurodivergent talent. President and CEO Larissa Couts shared how Melwood's model continues to evolve and what it means for the future of inclusive work. Larissa, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Terry.
Melwood has been a leader in disability employment for nearly 6 decades. How would you describe the mission today, and how has it changed over that time?
Well, today, Terry, Melwood is actually a family of companies with a shared vision of a world in which people with disabilities are fully included. For about 6 decades, we were one nonprofit entity, and recently we restructured in a way so that we can serve more people, have a greater impact, and grow the number of individuals that we serve.
Tell us about that restructuring and what it looks like today.
So today it looks like Melwood Inc. is our parent holding company, where we have all of our shared services, which we then flow down to our subsidiary companies, one of which is a federal contractor, a social enterprise, through which we employ nearly 900 individuals with disabilities on 60 plus federal contracts around the DC region. And we have Melwood Community Services, which provides licensed services to individuals like day programs. We have a camp for children with and without disabilities. We do after school programs. We're working on affordable housing now. So we have a number of companies with different missions, but all basically united by this vision that people with disabilities will have every opportunity that they'd like to be included in the community.
It sounds like it's more a life cycle of care.
Absolutely. We started doing a lot of workforce development and employment. That was the goal that began our nonprofit. But the more you work with that one pillar of the stool that makes up anyone's life, the more you see the need for healthcare, housing, community, and other aspects of what helps any person reach their full potential and live a life in the community that they choose.
Let's go back to the specific vocational support services that you offer. What are some unique capabilities that you provide to help individuals with disabilities really succeed and grow?
Absolutely. So we start from the pre-work world, which is workforce development. And we have done boot camps and trainings in a variety of different industries, including IT and tech, cybersecurity, AI, the construction trades, including as well as custodial, landscaping, mailroom. Will help train anybody with a disability in any field that they would choose to enter. Then we'd help them find a job, either it's with Melwood or with an employer in the community. And then we stay with them as a job coach, as someone that helps them integrate into the workforce, have hard conversations with your supervisor. How do you write an email when you're angry and frustrated? and work with transportation needs, housing needs, other things that arise that really do throw barriers and pitfalls in your road as you try to continue your career.
That sounds like training all of us could use a little bit of a refresher on.
I think that's right. I mean, I think the needs of every person with a disability are not unique. I think a lot of the needs are the things that we see. And we do a lot of training for employers as well, and individuals who do not have disabilities on how to help accommodate, be inclusive, and really listen to the needs of their employers and colleagues.
So as you bring these folks in to the federal contractor space at Melwood, what are the toughest adaptations that they go through, and how then do you work with government agencies to make sure that they're effectively using the talents of these individuals?
So one of the hardest barriers to overcome is taking yourself from your home environment, which you have managed to accommodate to your comfort level, to your sensory needs, to accommodate any physical needs, and to then find yourself in a job 9 to 5 every day of the week that wasn't necessarily crafted or created for a variety of different disabilities. And so we certainly work in our buildings as well as in government buildings to create opportunities to have a quiet space, to have a space where you can go kind of decompress if that's something that's needed during the day, or to be able to go, run around and get out some of the stimming type of behavior that someone might need to be able to re-regulate and just continue doing their work. I think remote work and hybrid work has helped quite a bit. A lot of our employees and other employees that we see out in the working world, to be able to have some days where you can focus without colleagues around, without a lot of noise on the work that you're doing. And it makes it easier to make it through the days that you do have to go in and have some of that social interaction, especially if you're not necessarily an extrovert by nature.
I'm speaking with Larissa Couts. She's the president and CEO of Melwood. Larissa, I want to go back a couple of years because Melwood partnered with MITRE and the University of Washington to launch a neurodiversity at work playbook and pilot with some federal government agencies. Can you tell us what you learned from that pilot and how it's playing out in the work that Melwood is doing now?
Absolutely. So we created a training program called AbiliT about 7 years ago to teach neurodivergent individuals the skills they need to get a certificate in a cybersecurity field and then to be able to enter that field. And we worked with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency to help them fill openings that they had for cybersecurity specialists, and worked with them to understand the value of having someone who looks at things a little bit differently, is neurodivergent, and found that the skills that they bring to the table are unlike other skills that that organization had seen, where they can catch mistakes, they can see patterns, they can really catch issues that weren't being caught. So it worked wonderfully, and we were able to adapt kind of the Autism at Work playbook for a neurodiversity in the federal government playbook, which we hope to continue to do in the future. Right now, we're taking our AbiliT program nationwide and teaching other nonprofits around the country to do the training so that we can help fill the labor needs of national companies that are looking for cybersecurity, as well as now AI technicians and individuals that can get certificates in those fields. And I think the neurodivergent population is perfect for the job.
I want to also point out a recent study with Virginia Tech showed that Melwood's model outperforms other employment mechanisms in both quality and cost effectiveness. What is it about the Melwood model, maybe the key ingredient to your soup, that makes it work so well?
A lot of it is the wraparound supports and the professional development supports that we offer, not just to our students, but also to the employers. So having employers at the front end that have needs for the workforce really helps make sure we have the pipeline of workforce development training all the way through the job. And then we stay with the individuals and we will coach them. And if they don't make it in the first job, we will help them find a second job and maybe find a different line of IT tech to go into if the first one that they chose didn't work.
I've been speaking with Larissa Couts. She's the president and CEO of Melwood. Larissa, thank you so much for being with me today and for the great work that Melwood is doing.
Thank you for having me, Terry.
You can find this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Listen to the Federal Drive on your schedule and your device. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. This special edition of the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton is produced by Eric White and Michelle Sandiford. Our web editors are Daisy Thornton and Stephanie Wright. For the latest updates, stay with federalnewsnetwork.com or follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Up next, the top national headlines from CBS News and the Federal Newscast. I'm Terry Gerton. Thanks for listening.